Have you ever found yourself just, staring at your inbox, dreaming of just disappearing for months? Not just a quick vacation, but like a complete reset. A real break to redefine, maybe refresh, or even rediscover who you are. Okay, let's unpack this a bit. Today, we're diving deep into the fascinating world of sabbaticals. Our mission here is to pull out the really important nuggets of knowledge from the sources we've looked at. We want to reveal not just what a sabbatical is, but its profound impact, who takes them, and crucially, how you might actually navigate the path to one yourself. It's about giving you the shortcut, really, to being well-informed on a topic that feels, well, more relevant than ever.
Yeah, and what's fascinating, I think, is that while this idea of an extended break might seem like a huge luxury, or maybe even totally out of reach for most people, the research clearly shows it can be a truly transformative peak life experience. Think of it like a major milestone event, right up there with big life shifts like getting married or having a child. We're going to explore how these intentional leaves from work aren't just pauses. They're really powerful opportunities for growth, both personally and professionally.
And just to really set the stage for how profound these breaks can be, let's talk about Bethany for a minute. She was in her early 30s working for the U.S. government, and her life just hit this series of intense crossroads. She'd gotten into a PhD program in law in Australia, planning to move closer to her partner, but then, bam, that relationship suddenly ended. And this was already on top of an incredibly hard year. Her father had passed away just months before. So understandably, she felt wholly overwhelmed, disoriented, and she worried she had, and this is a quote, lost the ability to appreciate joy in life.
Wow. Yeah. So instead of just, pushing through or jumping into the next job, Bethany made what sounds like a pretty radical choice for someone so driven. She spent a whole year meticulously saving. And then she took a 6-month sabbatical. During that time, she did things like volunteering and trekking through Latin America, visiting friends scattered across different continents, and she even walked the Camino de Santiago, that historic 500-mile pilgrimage across Spain.
And she came out of that experience with this incredible renewed focus, this new vigor. It really sounds like a total transformation.
Oh, it absolutely was. She reflected afterwards that it, quote, opened up my eyes about what I can do as a professional by giving me more confidence to try new things. Her whole perspective on life shifted. She realized, and this is a quote that really stuck with me too, she said, I always thought that the main goal in life was to get your ducks in a row. And now I've realized that there are a lot of different types of ducks, and they can be in any effing arrangement you want.
I love that.
Yeah.
Different ducks.
Exactly. And that shift in perspective, that confidence, it propelled her into her post-sabbatical career in California tribal and American Indian law. It was a field she'd actually been passionate about since law school.
Yeah.
So it's just a really powerful testament to how these breaks can literally reshape your entire life's path.
Yeah.
So when our sources talk about a sabbatical, they're definitely not just referring to like a really long vacation. They define it quite specifically as an intentional extended leave from your job-related work. And those words, intentional and extended, they're really key because it's purposeful. It goes way beyond just leisure. And there are a few core attributes that truly define it.
Right. So we're not talking about just a couple of weeks off or even a month. This is serious time away. What's the kind of a sweet spot for duration according to the research, and why is that specific length so important?
Exactly. Sabbaticals are generally measured in months, typically ranging from 3 months up to a year. And this duration is absolutely critical because, well, as one operations manager who took a 3-month stint abroad put it really powerfully, he said, I had to be forcibly removed from access to my work routines. Only after enough time away from those patterns did the world suddenly feel so big again. And I thought, oh my God, there's life beyond work.
Wow.
And our sources indicate that many people they interviewed said it took them up to 8 weeks, 8 whole weeks, just to begin to detach from work, which was apparently far longer than they anticipated. It really speaks to how deeply ingrained our work identities and routines become, doesn't it?
8 weeks just to start letting go. That really underscores the need for that extended time, doesn't it? It makes me wonder, does the research shed any light on why it takes so long, or what people tend to experience during that initial detachment phase? It almost sounds like an unlearning period.
It's very much an unlearning.
Yeah.
That initial period, maybe up to 8 weeks, it's often a time of just shedding, letting go of that constant mental hum of work, the deadlines, the daily grind. It's like your brain slowly remembers how to exist without constantly problem solving for your employer. And this leads right into the second key attribute, full disconnection. This means absolutely no work that's part of or even looks like your prior job. So, okay, a software engineer could go remodel a kitchen. That's totally fine. But doing tech consulting on the side, that's a definite no-go.
Ah.
And crucially, you should not be actively searching for your next job during this time either. The real intention is to stay fully present in that in-between state.
That makes so much sense. It's not just about stopping the work, but really honoring that uninterrupted space, almost like a sacred commitment you make to yourself.
Absolutely. And ideally, there's also geographic disconnection involved.
Yeah.
Physically getting away, out of town or even out of the country for as long as it's feasible. As one attorney put it, there's something critical about being in a new place where you don't know the rules and the players anymore. I felt like I was a different person, living a different life.
Yeah, that distance.
Distance just makes it profoundly easier to break those old familiar routines and truly reset your perspective.
Okay, so knowing what a sabbatical is, fundamentally, and how powerful it can be, the natural next question is, who are these people taking these transformative breaks, and what's really driving them? The research seems to point to 3 kind of fascinating archetypes that might resonate with you listening.
That's right. And it's important to note, sabbatical takers aren't just, academics or some privileged elite group. They're regular people from all ages, different industries, various walks of life. Interestingly, the strongest predictor of whether someone will actually take one is simply if they know someone else who has. That personal connection seems key.
Huh, interesting.
Yeah, and about 2/3 are also pushed into these breaks by what the sources call negative catalysts, things like a death in the family, a health scare, maybe a career crisis. And look, it's important we acknowledge that actually taking one often remains a privilege, right? Because most sabbaticals are self-funded.
Right, the financial piece is huge. Okay, so the first archetype you mentioned, the achiever. These sound like folks with a really clear, maybe tangible goal in mind for their time off.
Exactly. A really powerful example here is Ardace. She was a community organizer turned journalist working as a national correspondent for NPR. She felt she absolutely needed to tell her immigrant father's story, specifically about his wrongful treatment after 9/11. Now, NPR happened to have a formal sabbatical program, which is great, so she took leave specifically to write a book about it, and it became a bestseller.
Yep.
So achievers like Artie, they approach their time off with this productivity mindset. They focus intensely on what they get done, like maybe achieving fluency in a language or creating a community garden or completing a major hike like the Appalachian Trail. And while it might not sound like pure relaxation in the traditional sense, these high-effort, purposeful activities can be incredibly restorative, even if they're challenging. Artie even said, writing that book was one of the most emotional experiences of my life, akin to when I first looked at my newborn son.
That's powerful. It shows how even the achiever finds restoration in that intense activity. It's almost like a rechanneling of energy rather than just stopping completely.
Precisely. Though their common regret, interestingly, is often not taking enough time to simply rest right at the very beginning of their sabbatical. They tend to jump right in.
Ah, yeah, I can see that. For people who are so driven, is there maybe a risk they turn the sabbatical itself into just another performance metric instead of a true break? Or is the key that it's just a different kind of achievement?
I think it's more the latter. It's a different kind of achievement, absolutely. It's about channeling that drive, that energy, into something personally meaningful and completely outside the daily work grind, even if it's demanding. Which actually leads us perfectly into our second archetype, the explorer. These are the individuals who use this time off to really dig into those big what-if questions about their lives.
Okay, the explorers. Tell me more.
Well, take Paul. He was described as a whip-smart consultant, and every few years he'd take these extended breaks specifically to test out potential future paths. So one time he moved to Estonia, where his parents were from, for several months to study the language, seriously considering a life there. Another time he worked in different lodges in the U.S. Virgin Islands, Big Sur, Hawaii, to really test his dream of maybe running an eco-resort in retirement.
Wow, that's hands-on exploration.
Exactly. These endeavors are what psychologists call counterfactual thinking, actively imagining and then actually testing an alternative life scenario.
So it's one thing to sit and wonder, would I be happy as a teacher? But it's another thing entirely to actually go try teaching for a few months to find out. That takes a certain kind of courage, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And explorers, through these tests, they either confirm or they dispel these notions about what they'd rather be doing. And that leads to real clarity. Paul's explorations, for instance, they ultimately guided him towards a really successful career at Airbnb. He went in equipped with clear insights about what he did and, just as importantly, what he didn't want. And it's worth noting, too, you don't have to travel halfway around the world to be an explorer. It can be local volunteering, trying new hobbies, as long as the intention is to genuinely test a passion or a different way of living.
Right, the exploration can happen close to home, too. Okay, and finally, the third archetype. For many people, a sabbatical is a vital recovery tool, especially for those who are just plain burned out. And gosh, we've certainly seen a lot more discussion about burnout recently.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is Mary's story. She was a leader at a nonprofit. After about a decade of incredibly stressful, though meaningful, work, she found herself experiencing severe physical problems. Things like ulcers, chronic pain, insomnia, all directly linked to work stress. She was fortunate enough that her organization offered a paid sabbatical. But initially, she was so accustomed to being constantly busy that she felt almost paralyzed by the lack of responsibilities. She even admitted to doing some work from home at first.
Oh, wow, the habit is strong.
Very strong. But once she was actually en route to France, having intentionally left her laptop behind, that's when she finally began to truly, deeply relax.
And I imagine that deep disconnection, leaving the laptop, that was absolutely key for her.
Crucially key, yeah. She returned feeling profoundly re-energized. And perhaps most importantly, she came back realizing she needed to fundamentally change her work situation to make it sustainable. So she successfully lobbied for a new executive hire to help manage her increased workload. Very smart. Her activities during the sabbatical itself focused on just feeling human again, she said. Things like camping, connecting with nature. So while a sabbatical isn't maybe the only solution to burnout, it provides that essential respite. It creates the space for individuals to recognize and then actually address unsustainable work patterns.
Okay, so listening to those three, the achiever, the explorer, the burned out, you might recognize yourself in one, or maybe even a blend of them. But the really big question that often follows is, okay, how do you even make this happen? Because for most people, it sounds incredible, maybe a distant dream, but then reality just sort of sets in.
It's true. And taking a sabbatical, as we said, is often a privilege, primarily because formal programs from employers are still pretty rare. Our sources point to two main hurdles that most people face. They categorize them as responsibilities and perceptions. Responsibilities are those tangible commitments, financial, family, job stuff. While perceptions are more the intangible things, how we think about time off, how we worry others will judge us.
Okay, let's tackle the practical side first. Responsibilities. We're talking mortgages, family commitments, kids, pets. I mean, these are real immediate things. How do people manage that? How do they make the numbers work?
Right. So first off, professionally, you might not have to quit your job entirely. Many organizations, even those without formal sabbatical policies, might still be willing to make exceptions for valued employees, if you're brave enough to ask.
How do you frame that ask?
Well, the sources suggest framing it not as a demand, but more as an investment in your long-term commitment and effectiveness with the organization. Less ideal options, of course, like taking unpaid leave or even departing without a guaranteed job to return to, can also be considered, depending on your situation. And if you're worried about maybe appearing less serious, you can float a proposed sabbatical date years in the future. Give your team plenty of time to prepare. You can even propose a detailed transition plan to show how work will continue smoothly.
Okay, that makes sense. Planning ahead. And what about on the personal front? The home life stuff.
Yeah, for personal responsibilities, well, if you have kids, you'll need to investigate schools, maybe in new destinations if you travel. For pets, you might need long-term sitters or perhaps family help. Subletting your home is a common strategy. Putting large expenses on hold, cutting unnecessary recurring costs, these are all part of the financial planning. And crucially, the financial planning doesn't always mean, a decade of intense saving. Even a small, consistent savings discipline, if you approach it with the same seriousness as maybe retirement planning, can build surprising momentum over time for a self-funded break.
Right.
It's really about shifting from just an abstract goal to a tangible financial roadmap.
Like those two inspiring teachers we heard about. They saved for a decade, yes, but they made it happen. They traveled with their two kids from Arizona all the way to Argentina in a 50-year-old Land Rover.
That's amazing.
And the trip had such a profound impact that the father actually quit teaching afterwards to start a Land Rover restoration business.
Wow. Talk about transformative. Exactly. So the key insight there is committing to a concrete savings timeline and, if needed, maybe implementing an aggressive savings burst for a period. However, it's also really important advice from the sources. Don't take one if you truly can't fully commit. If you really lack the time or the financial resources right now, it's often better to postpone than to try and go in half-hearted.
That's solid advice. Okay, so beyond the logistics, the practical stuff, there's the mental game, right? The fear. The fear of what others might think, or even what you might think about taking such a significant break.
Absolutely. And this falls squarely under that perceptions hurdle. For many of us, our self-worth is deeply, deeply linked to our performance at work. So you might genuinely dread being asked that question. So what do you do for a living during your time off, especially if you've actually left your job?
Yeah, that question feels loaded sometimes.
It does. One powerful way our sources suggest alleviating this is to consciously adopt other work identities during your break. Like our title identifying primarily as a writer or Paul as an explorer. It gives you a different anchor. There's also, of course, the fear of how others might judge you, current or future employers, maybe even your in-laws, especially in a culture that often rewards overwork. People get lauded for staying late, for being available 24/7, even on vacation. Breaking that norm can feel really intimidating.
Oh, absolutely. That's a huge hurdle to overcome in a society that often glorifies being constantly busy. It feels countercultural.
It really does. But here's the good news.
Hmm.
The view seems to be shifting. There's a survey of Harvard Business School graduates mentioned, and it found that over one-third had actually taken a sabbatical. And maybe more importantly, over 90% of those who hadn't taken one viewed people who took extended leaves in a positive or, at worst, neutral light.
Oh, that's really encouraging.
It is. So the fears are often greater than the actual reality. And one of the best ways to overcome this fear is to find an exemplar. Find someone you admire who has taken a successful sabbatical. You can look on LinkedIn. People sometimes use the career break designation. Or check out Reddit forums, Facebook groups dedicated to sabbaticals. Sabbatical alumni, people who've done it, are usually incredibly helpful and really passionate advocates. They can be a fantastic resource and a great source of validation when you're feeling unsure.
That's a great tip, finding an exemplar. Okay, so let's imagine you've navigated those hurdles, you've dealt with the responsibilities, managed the perceptions, and you've committed. You're going for it. The next crucial step, and maybe the most important one, is ensuring it's not just a long break, but a truly successful, enriching experience. What does the research say makes the real difference there?
Yeah, this is key. The research offers 4 main principles for making a sabbatical successful. First, you absolutely must set impenetrable boundaries around your time off. This means absolutely no checking work email, no scrolling LinkedIn for job opportunities, no sneaking glances at industry news that relates back to your prior role.
Total cutoff.
Total cutoff. This is your uninterrupted time, and you might honestly never get another block quite like it again. The key insight here is that the break needs to be a truly separate container from your working life. That separation is what makes it effective.
That makes so much sense. It's not just about setting the boundaries, but really honoring that space. Isn't it like a sacred commitment to yourself?
Precisely. Okay, second principle. Get out of your head and into your body. The initial part of your sabbatical, especially, should really be focused on healing and restoration. So instead of immediately trying to, say, learn a new language or launch that startup idea you've had, prioritize movement, like maybe a multi-day trek or a yoga retreat, or hands-on activities like ceramics or gardening. Spend long stretches just being in nature to re-experience that feeling of awe. This principle really highlights that it's often our cognitive minds, our thinking brains, that are the most burned out. So engaging the physical and sensory parts of ourselves is crucial for true revitalization. Third, prioritize spending time on relationships. We know from tons of research that strong personal connections consistently lead to happier, healthier lives. Use your newfound flexibility to visit loved ones on their timeline for a change, rather than always waiting for your busy schedules to somehow magically sync up.
That's a lovely idea.
And importantly, don't forget to prioritize your relationship with yourself. Even if you're partnered, make sure to carve out dedicated time for maybe a solo retreat. And consider finding a therapist or a coach, perhaps someone who understands the unique issues that can come up around extended leave to help you process the transition.
That's a really important point, that relationship with yourself often gets neglected in the daily grind. And what's the last crucial piece of advice for success?
Finally, the fourth principle is, don't stay out too long. It sounds a bit counterintuitive maybe, but many sabbatical takers, especially those who are between jobs, kind of assume they'll have everything figured out by the end. The dream job identified, the big life change perfectly executed. And while that sometimes happens, the key insight here is that a sabbatical is rarely the final destination for clarity.
Okay.
It's more like an essential launch pad. It's the critical first step that unlocks the next phase of your life. It provides the space and perspective needed to gain momentum. So don't let perfect be the enemy of good here. It's actually better the sources suggest, to re-enter the workforce, maybe wanting more, feeling eager for your next challenge,
Yeah.
than it is to stay out so long that you start to resent the experience because it wasn't some complete magical transformation or because you had unrealistic expectations.
Right, manage the expectations about what the end result will be. It's a step, not the entire journey.
Exactly. So if we kind of connect all this back to the bigger picture, it's really clear that while the concept of a sabbatical might seem ambitious, maybe even daunting, the research universally describes it as a peak life experience and a profoundly worthwhile investment in, well, a better life. It's fundamentally about creating that essential space for growth, for perspective, and for a deeper connection to what truly matters to you.
And here's where I think it gets really interesting looking forward. We live in this culture, right, that still tends to lionize overwork, where people often don't even take all their regular vacation days. But you see shifts happening, with younger generations valuing flexibility and purpose more explicitly, and maybe with some post-pandemic insights into different ways of working. This whole idea of taking intentional, extended time off feels like an idea whose time has finally come. It feels like the world is maybe starting to catch up to what these early sabbatical takers figured out.
I think so too. And this raises perhaps an important closing question for you, the listener. You really shouldn't have to wait for something to break. You shouldn't have to wait for burnout to hit or for some major crisis to erupt to give yourself permission to explore what truly makes life worth living for you. So maybe just allow yourself, even briefly, to turn down the volume on the boardroom logistics, the quarterly goals, the team dynamics, all that noise, and just try to let your quieter inner voice emerge for a moment. Ask yourself, what are the things that really light up my curiosity, either now or maybe when I was younger? Thus far in life, what do I most regret not having done? Your answers to those kinds of questions, well, they might just point you in a wonderfully new and unexpected direction.